Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast. I am Bill, the company's expert, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about how much are you worth? This is a timeless question. It never goes away. A lot of my awesome viewers and listeners leave comments on my YouTube videos, and invariably, this is something that keeps coming up. People are constantly saying, employers should pay me what I'm worth. And opinion is divided on how much everybody is worth, but that's what we're going to explore today. Now, what's interesting about this topic is I actually used to teach a course in universities as part of the HR program within business that was about compensation, and I covered sort of total compensation, how it works, and then I've taught other courses on executive compensation and like intro to executive compensation, stuff like that. But that's not really what we're going to be getting into today. We're going to be getting into some of the fundamental concepts of how employers determine how much compensation you should get. And this is based on this idea of what you're worth. Okay, what are you worth? This is actually a lot harder of a question than first leaps to mind when people think about this. So let's dive in. Okay, now, as I said, a comment that a lot of people leave, and this reflects their thoughts when they're getting a job and when they're existing and considering leaving a job and quitting their job, is, why don't you pay me what I'm worth? Okay, this concept of what I'm worth. And if you could determine what you're worth, then in theory, you could go from that to what my pay should be. Okay, they're actually two separate concepts, but we're going to sort of tie the two together. Now, the most obvious kind of thing to do that everybody always talks about is you can go on the internet, you can go on the web, and there's various websites where you can enter in your job description, you can enter in your location. You can enter in other factors like years of experience and maybe education and other training and things you have. And the website will spit out a sort of average pay or average compensation for that job in that region with somebody matching your parameters, right? And a lot of people do this. And the first thing I want to say is that these things are not usually pinpoint accurate. Sometimes they give you very good sort of ranges, but depending on the job that you're entering in, sometimes the accuracy of these things can go from really good to really terrible. And the ones that I've used and that I'm semi-familiar with, or at least I have been in the past, was things like Glassdoor.com, or payscale.com. There was other ones too, like salary.com. I don't know how useful that one is still. But there's a lot of websites like this, and you can get that. Now the big question is, what is that telling you? Okay, let's say for the sake of argument that the data it gives you is accurate. And you enter your job description. You say, okay, I'm working as a warehouse supervisor. And you enter in your region, like your city, your location, and you enter in maybe your years of experience that you've been in that role. Okay, and what it will do is it'll give you a sort of, it'll give you a few numbers. Probably the most useful is average compensation. Okay, now this gets a bit muddy right off the hop, because as a lot of you guys suspect, people are not always compensated the same way. For example, when you work in an organization, okay, for a start, your compensation is broken down into different types. There's three main types: your base pay, your performance pay, and your indirect pay. Okay, base pay is your annual salary or your hourly wage. Okay, performance pay is bonus pay that you may get for performance. So based on if you meet specific targets, you can get extra money. Now this goes all the way from people working at a very low level, at the worker level, if you meet certain targets or numbers for a day or for a job or whatever, you get a bonus. You get like another $100 or something like that, right? All the way up to when you talk about how executives are compensated, a lot of the time, the vast majority of their pay is not base pay, it's performance pay. Okay, that's kind of the biggest component. So you got base pay, performance pay, and then you also have indirect pay. So if you've ever received benefits or anything else from your job, that's indirect pay. Indirect pay is when they give you something other than cash, right? So if they give you a thing, like use of a company car or medical insurance or retirement, they match a retirement fund or a pension or anything like that, right? You got all kinds of stuff in there. Basically anything that they give you that isn't hard money, it isn't cash, that falls under this category, okay? So for a start, depending on what employer you're working for, they may have a different mix, okay? This is called the compensation mix. They may have a different mix. Some people pay all base pay. Other people pay mainly, indirect pay. They have like very generous, very elaborate benefit packages, things like this. And so as a result, they pay you less base pay, or they might not have any performance pay. So you get all kinds of stuff. So already this is muddying the waters, okay? And it gets even more complicated when you get into things like nonprofits and other organizations where, they're basically charities and people are not there to get cash. I mean, that's not the motivation. They're receiving indirect pay. They're receiving something other than cash. And a lot of times that could even go up to including things like the good feeling you get when you help someone and they say, thank you, you've really made a difference in my life. For some people, that's their entire motivation for working very, very hard and a large amount of long hours at charities, okay? And a lot of private companies, a lot of CEOs and things of smaller companies and things, they envy the motivation of the people that work at charities, and they would love to get that kind of productivity out of their employees. And they don't fully understand it because these people are working for practically no money at a charity, yet they're being more productive than their employees that they're paying a lot more for. So it's complicated. Now, the purpose of this podcast is not to complicate things. We're going to sort of sort through this and we're going to get some answers here, okay? Now, let's return to this idea of what I'm worth. Let's start talking about how employers calculate this, okay? There's basically three fundamental ways that an employer can determine what you're worth, okay? And that's in quotes, right? There's actually way more than three, but I'll limit it to the three major ones here. First of all, we can go off market price, okay? Now, what is market price? Well, market price is simply the average amount that someone in your job with, in your location with your experience will make, okay? It's the average price. That means if you summed up all the companies that are employing someone with that particular role, and you added up, you took the average of the amount of pay that they were paying. This would be the average price, the average amount of pay. Some companies would be paying more than this. Some companies would be paying less than this, but the average would be market price. Okay. Now, does market price mean that's what you're worth? No, it doesn't. In fact, companies that pay more than the market price, that's called leading the market. They intentionally do this. They say, look, I want the best of the best in every position. I want us to be able to get anyone we want in all the different roles we have. We're going to pay a premium for this, but I want the best people. Other companies, they'll say, we want to lag the market. We want to pay below market price. Other companies may pay more, but we only pay this much. And, quite frankly, these roles are not that demanding, and most people will do. They've made that decision. They're competing basically on price, and they're looking to cut their costs any way possible. And And this is one of the things they do. Alternatively, other organizations will match the market. They will pay market price. And they will use the fact that they are paying the average amount as some kind of proof that that's what those individuals are worth. I mean, it doesn't hold any water. It's just something that they refer to justify how much they're paying people, and market price fluctuates. It's based on supply and demand. And, if there's an economic boom in your region and everybody's got, a good paying job, the market price will go up, right? If there's a recession or something and a lot of people are out of work, then the market price will go down, right? It has nothing to do with the actual intrinsic value of the employee. It's just, the market conditions, right? So this is something that a lot of people refer to when they refer to how much you're worth, okay? But it's actually a very bad way of looking at this, okay? Because as an alternative to market price, let's look at another way of determining somebody's value, okay? And I would argue that this is much more accurate in determining, and giving a definitive answer to how much somebody is worth, okay? And that's the amount of revenue or the amount of profit that you generate, okay? Let me put it to you this way. You have a group of people, let's say 10 employees, okay? And those 10 employees, they constitute one business unit, okay? So they create, market, and sell one product, okay? That's their job, all 10 of them. And they all contribute to this. A couple of people make the product, a couple of people sell the product, a couple of people do the administration, and a couple of people, they do like supply chain logistics and all the other kind of stuff you need in there. And then one person is the manager who sort of coordinates everything, right? Now, there's 10 employees and all 10 of them working in their roles, okay? Let's say that they generate $1 million a year profit, okay? That's what they achieve. So the only thing that we can really say that's based in fact is that those 10 employees altogether as a unit are worth $1 million a year, okay? Because that's the amount of money that they bring in the door, okay? Now, what you could say therefore, is that each person in that business unit, each one of those 10 people, is worth 1/10 of the profit they bring in every year. So that would be each person is worth $100,000 a year, okay? That's one way of looking at this. Okay, so if somebody says, well, what are these people worth? Well, you could say, well, on average, each person in this business unit is worth $100,000 because on average, that's the amount of money that is brought in per employee. Okay, so you could do that. Now, perhaps you could argue that, some employees contribute more to bringing in that money than others, but that's all based on opinions and theories, and there's, it's kind of flimsy. There's no hard facts you can really state that back up any kind of theory of exactly how much one individual is worth in that group. Okay, all you can say is that all 10 of them working together bring in $1 million profit a year. Okay, that's all you can say. So this is another way of looking at how much an employee is worth, right? It has nothing to do with the market price. It has absolutely nothing to do with how much other companies are paying for those roles. All the other companies could be going broke and be paying like minimum wage, whereas this company is having a boom and they're very profitable, and consequently, each of those people is worth much more. Okay, so this is a way of looking at your value that has nothing to do with the average price in that region for the job. Okay, the two things are disconnected. Now, there is a third way of looking at this. I'll just kind of go over this quickly because we see this less often. And that is companies that look at your skills and capabilities. Okay, this is called pay for knowledge. And for example, if you hired a janitor to sweep the floor, and the janitor happened to have a PhD. Okay, maybe they were coming from another country and they just arrived and they need a job today, and the only job going was a janitor job, and they took it, right? They didn't get it on the strength of them having a PhD, but they just happen to have a PhD. So you've employed someone with a PhD as a janitor, okay? Now, if you're looking at what the pay would be for that person, what they're worth, okay? If you're looking at things like market price, it would probably come out to something like minimum wage. It'd be paid pretty low to work as a janitor, okay? Like an unskilled labor cleaning type thing. Usually that's what we see. Alternatively, you can look at the fact that this individual you just hired has a PhD. So instead of evaluating them on market price, you could evaluate them on their skills and competency. Now, if you look at their resume and you see, I see here that you have a PhD, you were a colonel in the military back in your home country, so you are very capable, you know how to manage people, you are very responsible, and you are very dedicated. You've also been in that role a long time, and that tends to suggest that your abilities are tried and true. Okay. I'm just making this example up off the top of my head, but based on that kind of skills and capabilities, that track record, you would not be paying this person minimum wage. Okay. And the idea is that some organizations tend to value people this way. They say, look, we've got a janitor with a PhD. Now, that janitor, maybe they have some interaction with, managers and designers and engineers and things. And, they can maybe even contribute to that. And in that way, we will be potentially harnessing this person's capabilities. Okay. We don't see this too often. We do see it sometimes, things like people that get employed for to work in R&D and stuff like that. It's about what your capabilities are. Okay. So anyway, I mean, this is something we also see this with some manager type roles where they pay money, they pay compensation based on people's traits. Okay. Like instead of skills, some training that you've gone through, they will reward you based on your traits. Let's say you're very charismatic. Let's say, you're a very good negotiator, okay? You might never have gone to school and have any formal credentials, but you have shown yourself to be an extremely capable negotiator or salesperson. You have a lot of personal charisma, and you look very trustworthy, and people are, customers are always impressed when we wheel you out and get you to do the presentation. So that's worth a lot of money. Maybe that person managed to close a multi-million-dollar deal and everybody was impressed, right? So now this person is valued quite a lot, even though on paper, they might not have a lot of experience and a lot of education, but it's the traits they have. We see this with public figures and stuff, people that work in PR and politicians, stuff like this. These kind of traits are valued. So this is yet another way of looking at people's value. Okay. And as I say, if you go to different organizations and try and get a job there, different organizations will value people in different ways. And these are the three principal ways that you can place value on an employee. Okay. Now, there are a lot of other things that come into play here. And, there's also some psychological factors that sort of, they explain what we're doing here, and they explain why organizations do what they do. For a start, the entire point of compensation, when you think about what it is, a lot of people don't do this. They don't actually think about what compensation is. They think like, it's pay that somebody gives me and I show up for work, right? Well, yes, they do that, but why do they do that? They do it because they are the compensation is a reward, is something that motivates you. Okay, it's a motivator, right? There are a lot of jobs out there that people who are in them, they don't do for fun, right? I know this is self-evident, but just bear with me. They don't do their jobs for fun. You have to pay someone to show up and do their job, right? Money or compensation is the motivator. And there's many types of compensation. You know, some people do things for money. Other times, if you think of like students coming out of school, like university or college, they come out and they take their first career type job. A lot of times they're not making a ton of money, but they're doing it because they want to get that letter of recommendation, or they're doing it because they want to get something reputable to put on their resume, or they want to make connections within their industry, you know, or they're doing it because they want to actually learn with some hard experience how to do that job. And these are other things. These are things that are motivating those students to be in those jobs. We see internships that are an extreme form of this. You get paid practically nothing to be an internship, but you're still doing work. You know, why do people do the work? Well, obviously they're not being motivated by money. They're being motivated by other things. They're getting other things out of it. Okay. And this is the thing, right? So we tie that to what we see in the real world, where you have a lot of times you've got some people that are highly motivated. Okay, they're being paid a lot of money, and I'm talking total compensation. That's the cash you get, and that's like benefits and other things. They're getting a lot, but yet they're really not motivated to do their job very well. You know, maybe they've been in that job for many years, and they're cynical and they're bored, and you know, they no longer have any enthusiasm for their job. They will no longer do anything more than the bare minimum that they need to do to not get fired. And the amount of compensation you're paying them really doesn't justify the effort that they're putting in, because they're not motivated. On the other hand, we see the opposite of that. We see, you know, a lot of times young people, or like I used the charity example before as an extreme example, where you're paying people practically nothing, but yet they're very highly motivated and very enthusiastic about doing their job. They have a ton of energy. They're very dedicated, and they're really going above and beyond, doing all kinds of non-standard things, maybe working very long hours and stuff, you know, when you're not really paying them very much. So this is really what's driving the amount of pay you get, the amount of value the employer places on you, okay? It's mainly driven by motivation. How can I get this person to behave in a way that I would have them behave? I want them to show up on time. I want them to be dedicated. I want them, if they see an opportunity for improvement, I want them to pursue that opportunity and expend extra effort that, you know, is technically optional to seize these opportunities. That's the kind of behavior I want. Okay, I want people to be loyal. I want people to be dedicated. Blah 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 blah. Right, and that's what, in theory, they're paying for. That's how they assign compensation. Okay, and as you can appreciate, depending on where you work, money and compensation might not be the biggest factor that determines your behavior. You know, maybe they're paying you a lot of money, but they have this horrible, absolutely miserable boss that completely ruins your life whenever you work there. You know what I mean? The money's not going to motivate you. So it's these kind of factors that go into compensation, which ultimately is based on, in a lot of people's minds, you know, what they're worth. If somebody gets a certain amount of pay, they make the connection with, oh, I must be worth that much. And that's not necessarily true. Okay. But these are a lot of the factors that go into it. Okay. Now, if you are in a job where you feel that you are not compensated fairly or optimally, or you're not paid what you're worth, here's another little thing I'm going to throw at you just to end off here. And that is, they've done many studies on this, and they found that there are some psychological factors here. One thing they've determined is that human beings, normal human beings, we tend to overestimate our worth. You know, they've done tons of experiments on this where, you know, they'll give everybody a test of some kind. But before you get the results back, they'll ask everybody, they'll do a poll and ask everyone, how well did you think you did? Right? And everybody will consistently estimate, I did really, really well. And then you get the marks back, and the actual results are quite a bit lower than how well people think they did. And this applies also to our performance, our job performance. How well do you think you're performing as an employee? If you're the employer, how well would you rate yourself? And everybody consistently rates themselves much higher than what the employer rates them as. This is an interesting factor, and they've done all kinds of controlled studies, and they've found this time and time again over many decades. This is another factor. So everybody continually feels that they're being paid less than what they're worth. In their mind, they're worth more than what other people think they're worth, mainly their employer. So if this is you, now you got a couple of options here. One, that could be true for you, or it might not be. You might actually be worth a lot more than they think you're worth. And a great way to do that is to go based on results, okay? That first method of determining somebody's value. And this is why I advocate a lot of times for, especially in this day and age, people doing the entrepreneurship thing. If you think, you're good and you know your stuff and you're highly valuable, maybe you should consider some kind of side hustle where you do something on the side, where you start to take control of your own worth, your own value, and your own compensation. And you're not simply limited by what someone will pay you and what their estimate of your value is. You determine your own value and what you can do in the free market. So that's another reason why I advocate for that. And it can be a solution to those of you who are out there who you feel that you're being consistently undervalued by everybody and nobody sees your potential and nobody exploits your potential. They maybe have you underemployed in some way, and that's a very common thing. And if you feel that way, I'm here to tell you that that might just be true. And the only way to find out is to put it to the test. And even if you put it to the test and you fail now, life is long. And if you cultivate those skills, after a little while, you might find that you are extremely valuable and you might be able to make your fortune that way. So I highly encourage everyone to do it. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Thank you very much for this, for listening to me this long on this sort of rambling exploration about compensation. It's a very big topic. It's very hard to sort of pare it down to simple bite-sized pieces, but I hope that was useful for you. Thank you for listening. You guys are awesome. Let me know in the comments what you think, and I hope to see and hear you next time on the next episode of the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast. Take care.